I've found a better graph to use for my Yorkshire buttons and my Tenerife lace patterns that I print up, and I'm going to show you what I've discovered. And I guess I should have looked into it a little bit more. Maybe they just made it available now, I don't know. But I use these two different sites, the Mathpolate and the Incompetech site, to generate graph paper, and it's free, so it's really nice to use. I use their graph paper for all kinds of things. I've used these grid dots recently for our paper quilling class. There's all kinds of grids that you can use. I also like to use these for English paper piecing. It's just really nice to customize your patterns. In the past, I've always gone straight to the circle grid to make patterns for my Tenerife lace, and now I'm doing the Yorkshire buttons, which is very similar to Tenerife lace. And the reason I liked this one was because I could tell it what size I wanted the squares to be. I could work in metric or I could work in inches. And the 0.25, I was making the 1/4 inch spacing, which was really nice for my Tenerife lace patterns, and I could choose however many spokes I wanted and generate a pattern. But I want to show you why I don't like this one for the Yorkshire buttons. For Tenerife lace, it was nice to have the 1/4 inch spacing with all of the concentric circles, because it would kind of give me a visual of where to put my next knots. The only thing I don't like about this is the automatic graph paper in the back, and I couldn't make that a different color. I couldn't find a way to do it anyway. And it gets a little bit busy when you get ready to put your pins in the pattern, either for the Yorkshire buttons or for the Tenerife lace. You're pinning them to a little, what we call the lace pillow, and that makes your pattern. So everywhere a spoke intersects your circle that you're using, that's where you put a pin. Well, it gets so busy, my eyesight is really bad, and sometimes I can't tell where to put the pin. So I found a really better way to do this, excuse me, and I'm going to show it on the Incompetech, and I'll tell you why I prefer the Mathpolate for this. So if you go on down, just explore a little bit more in the graph paper section and go a little bit further down, you'll see the polar circles, and that gets rid of the square grid on the background. The Incompetech doesn't give me as many choices here. I can still choose my circles. I can do primary spokes. I can also do secondary spokes, which the secondary spokes are these ones that show up in between. I can get rid of all these spokes meeting in the middle by just clearing that or putting a simple cross in the middle. So those things are customizable, and you can play with that also. But I don't see anywhere in here if I can tell it how far apart I wanted the spacing to be. On the graph paper, I could say 0.25 for my squares, and that would make my concentric circles 0.25 across the board, or I could customize it to whatever I wanted. But if you go to mathpolate.com and go over to their polar grids section, I've already started playing with a pattern here, and I really like theirs for the reason that on the spacing, this is the most important thing here, is the spacing. If you leave it on auto and you regenerate your pattern, it's going to just explode it to whatever size paper you're using. So you can tell it exactly how far apart you want your concentric circles to be, and whatever this size is, that's how big your pattern's going to be. So let's just go through the settings here. For the circles, you have to do at least 2, but if I do 2, let's just do 2. And I've got this set for a cross in the middle, just a simple little cross. The spokes disappear, and I need to know where to put my pin, so I'm going to have to make this normal. If I do just 2 circles, I'm going to have to make it normal so that my spokes come back. So if I'm making a pattern just for a 1/2 inch button, I'm going to say 2 circles at 0.25, and so that's going to give me a 1/2 inch pattern. So, and the 1/2 inch is going to be from the middle out from the radius, which is perfect because we need double the size of the diameter, because our 1/2 inch button is just going to be finished at this size once we turn it under and gather it on the other side. So you need double. So it just makes it easy on this one. So for a small button, I'm going to do 12 spokes. If I'm going to do the larger button, I'm going to do probably 16 to 24 spokes. So if I wanted a 3/4 inch button, I can simply say 3 circles and say 16 or 24 spokes. Let's make 0 of the secondary spokes. We don't need that. I'll show you that in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and say cross in the middle and say regenerate. So this would be my 3/4 inch button pattern. So I know I've got 1, 2, 3/4 out from the middle, and that's my 3/4 inch button. So I'd use this outer edge and I'd put a pin in each one of these spokes. So if I want to use the same pattern for both of my my buttons, I can make whatever number I want in the top one and still use my 1/4 inch spacing. I can do double that amount. If you do 16, it's going to get a little weird. So I'm just going to show you at 16. I'm going to leave the cross in the middle and regenerate. So you can see if I try to zoom in, it messes up my labels over here if I zoom in too much. But it's kind of hard to tell. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 green ones. So you know the green ones are kind of hid behind some of these red ones. So I would not double up on a pattern like this if you only wanted an odd number of spokes. Like I don't mean odd number, an even number, but if it wasn't double this. So if I were going to use this pattern for both the 1/2 inch and the 1/4 inch, I would make a number that equals or is double the spokes up there, so that they kind of work with each other. So now I'd know for my 3/4 inch button, I'm going to go out 1, 2, 3 from the center, and I'm going to use every one of these intersections so that I can have 24 spokes. Generally, I just make a pattern just for the size button. So each page that I generate is going to be specifically for that button size, because most of the time I just want 16 spokes for the 3/4 inch button. The reason you want more spokes for the bigger the button is because if you're using just the red one or just 12 for a 3/4 inch button, this space gets really wide between the spokes. So just play around with that. So again, there's a lot of things you can do on this one, but the main reason I like this one is because I can tell it how the spacing goes. So if I were making this one just for the 3/4 inch button, I'm going to say 0. I'm going to leave it at 3. I'm going to make 16 spokes, and that's what my pattern's going to look like. So again, for the 1/2 inch one, if you say 2 spokes, you're going to have to turn on this middle circle so that you get your spokes. So I hope all that makes sense. So once you've figured out and you've played around, you've got your pattern. The other reason I like this particular pattern is that I don't have all that extra grid going on here in the background. So I can print this out. I can cut out, if my little Tenerife lace pillow is 5 inches, I can just cut out, just rough cut around this and pin this right to my Tenerife lace pillow, and I'll show that in a minute. So what I do now is I'll go to my output size and I'll download it. So I have my download button set to ask me where I want to save it. Yours may go straight to your download folder. Once you do that, you tell it where you want to save it. I've already got a name in here. I'm just going to call this temp because I don't want to override anything I've got. And then I'm just going to open that folder. And there's my little pattern. We can open it up in a browser, or we can open it up in Adobe and print it up. Sometimes, oh, it's asking me all kinds of stuff. Sometimes it depends on how your computer's set up. It may open it up in a new browser window, but when you get ready to print, it's important that you tell it to print the actual size, not to fit the page or anything like that, because you want to make sure your 1/4 inch scale is still, valid. So I would just say actual size on my printer. Your printer may be different, or you can say 100%, whatever, and then I would print this up. Okay, I've got my little Tenerife lace pillow, and I showed in my Tenerife lace playlist how to make these. It's just a couple of pieces of foam to get the thickness so my pins won't go through, and I just wrapped them in fabric. You can make them any size that you want. I'm going to try to get enough of this in the video. You'll need some pins, you'll need your pattern that we printed up, and you'll need either a laminating machine or some contact paper. I like to use these sheet protectors, and I just cut little pieces out of them. And the reason is because your needle's going to be passing over that paper. If you pin this directly to your thing and you're sewing along, it's going to be constantly tearing your pattern, and it's just going to be crazy. So what I want to do is cut this pattern out to fit onto my little loom. So you just kind of center your pattern onto your little lace pillow, and then you cover it with the plastic. I'm not too worried about the paper shifting because we're going to be putting pins into those intersections, so it's going to keep that paper from shifting. But you might want to use applique pins to put some of this down, but I've found that the thickness that I've got going on here is not, they're not going all the way through. All right, I want to show you this foam also. These I've cut out of floor mats, those puzzle floor mats that you can buy. I got them on sale at Sam's, and we use them for our classes at the church. And I make enough for everybody. When we had our Tenerife lace class, everybody got their own little loom. I found this at Dollar Tree, and it is one of those things that you kneel on to do gardening. You can just cut this in half. It was like $1.25 for one of these. So find some really dense foam. The craft foam that you find at Hobby Lobby is too fragile to put pins in. It's not going to hold once you put pressure on your thread. So back to our pattern here. So if I wanted to make the half-inch button, I'm going to count out, since I know my spacing is a 1/4 inch, I'm going to count out 2, so that this is a 1/2 inch this way and a 1/2 inch that way, so it's double, so my button can be turned under and gathered on the other side. So I would use this circle. So I would put my pins in at an angle at every red mark. So if I were making the 3/4 inch button, I'm counting 1, 2, 3 out from the end, but I want more spokes for my bigger button, so I would use the red and the green, like that. But let's just go ahead and do the 3/4 inch button just for demonstration. So as far as the tools I'm using, I've just got a whole basket full of tools that I use and I've picked up over the years. And when I started making bobbin lace, you really needed a pattern, what they call a pattern pricker, and all it is just a needle. You can just use a long, sharp needle to make little holes, and it comes in handy when you're like on bobbin lace, there's a lot of pins, tons of pins you have to use, and it's always nice to take the pattern pricker and go ahead and prick out your pattern so that you'll know exactly where to put your pins. And but on this type pattern, it's not that bad. You just go ahead and put your pins in, and also the sheet protector is pretty easy to push the pin through, but your fingers could get quite sore if you don't prick out the pattern ahead of time. So this right here is a pin vise that I bought on Amazon, and I just put a needle in there, and you just unscrew this little thing, and it tightens up around the pin, and it's really nice. I've just got just a scrap piece of foam there that I protect the tip. For our classes, I made everyone, I 3D printed everyone their own little pattern pricker, and I'll try to remember to put the 3D files in this video so that if you have a 3D printer, you can go ahead and print up your own, and I just glued a needle down into the hole. It was less expensive for our class just to 3D print some of these things, so they wouldn't have to go out and buy these lace tools. This is a pin puller. When your pins are in, it helps your fingers to have something to pull the pins out. So what I did for the class is I just put a little bobby pin. I made a hole so that you could stick a bobby pin or I forgot what you call those. It's just anything that you can come in and you can pull your pins out, and it worked. It's not as easy as this little chip lifter or this little pin lifter, but it gave them something to help them out so that their fingers wouldn't get sore. And then I have the pin pusher on the other side, so you can push the pins in without your fingers getting sore. So if you decide you're going to be doing a lot of these, it'd be worth it to go buy one of these from the lace supply stores. Okay, so I've already put little pinholes where my pattern's going to go, and I'm just going to put your pins in at an angle, because when you're pulling, the threads are going to be pulling toward the center, and if you have your pins in straight, your stitches tend to ride up and down on the pins, so if you have them at an angle, they won't do that. And this foam is really nice. It holds the pins. They don't wiggle around a whole lot, and they're just so nice to work on. You'll want to go ahead and push these down a little bit further. I go about 3/8 of an inch or so down. If they're really tall like that, your thread is just going to be constantly tangling up. You don't have to be real precise or anything like that. Just get them down to a working level, so that it's easy to warp the thing, but not constantly be hanging up on the pins. It's not bad. So if you got something to push your pins in with, if it's a thimble or something, that will really save your fingers. Alright, so I've already done a video on how to warp this, but I'm just going to kind of get started on this. So you don't have to go back and watch that. So what I do is, and you can actually write it on your paper if you want to, but I've already got this pinned down. I'll just take a colored pen and I'll mark where my 12 o'clock is. So I always know when I get that pen is a little bit too long, so that when I'm doing my rounds I don't get to daydreaming and go past the point, because some of my patterns I want to know where that is. On most of the Yorkshire buttons you just keep going round and round, it doesn't matter, but I like to mark the 12 o'clock. And if I did this again, I would take like a red ink pen or something and I would mark that upward position. So I just take my crochet thread, this is a number 10, whatever kind of yarn or thread you're using, and I like to get a long pointed needle. It can be a doll needle, something you sew with. It just needs to be pointed and sharp. I think this might be a needle, tatting needle, so that one's not sharp. This one's pretty sharp. So you just thread your needle. Do not cut your yarn. Just put your yarn in a box on the floor and poke straight down through the middle. That's why I like to have the little cross in the middle. And then I can usually shove it down with my table like this until it comes out the back. And sometimes it can be a little hard to pull through, but just pull it through, take the needle off. And I keep all kinds of pins stored on the side, and also the fabric that I have wrapped around this foam, I have that pinned in place, but I like to use these big pins like this. And I'll take one of them and put it at the top of my loom, and I'll take that tail that I pulled through to the other side, shorten it a little bit, and then I just wrap it around that pin and anchor it. So on a little 3D printed loom like this, you would tape your thread to the back side, or if you're using cardboard or something like that. I may include the 3D file so that you can print your own little loom. These are really fast and easy to warp up, but it is sometimes a little difficult to pop your loops off at the end. I haven't had too much trouble with that, but I've printed them up about 1 millimeter thick on my design so that this PLA plastic is a little bit flexible. It's not as flexible as cardboard, but I find that the acrylic ones, I've cut those on my Glowforge, and they're a little bit stiffer than the PLA plastic. So just whatever you want to use, but I find this really nice and easy. My loom is easy to hold on to, and when I'm done I just pull the pins out and I can get my pattern off really quickly. So to warp this I would do just your regular Yorkshire button warping. So on a loom like this, your spokes are right between each of these petals, so you're wrapping around the petals. On this one, 2 pins would be like the petals on one of those looms. So I'd go around 2 pins. I always cross through the center, and whatever pin I'm pointing at, I go around that one like that. Cross through the center, always crossing through the center. And I just turn my loom, and right at first you're going to have some gaps in there until you go around the second time. We want every pin to have 2 loops on it, or 2 strands on it. So just be just a little mindful of that. The more pins, the kind of harder it is to see where to go. So I just try to make sure I'm crossing the center and see which pin I'm pointing at. So now I'm going to start closing the gaps, because I've already gone around those pins one time. So now I'm just doubling up. So I'm slowly closing the gaps. And so now I'm starting to get 2 strands on every pin. I'm trying to look at the camera at the same time as doing this. So it kind of gets intuitive after a while. The more spokes you have, the harder it is to see what you're doing. Just take your time. Across the center. And so on and so forth, until every pin has 2 threads. And I think I'm back to the beginning, because there's my 12 o'clock, and what I do is I take another pin and wrap it around to anchor it. And then I measure up how much thread I want to use for. I usually work with about 1.5 yards or so, so it doesn't get all tangled. And so by anchoring this thread, it gives me time to thread up my needle and all of that. And so to get ready to sew, I would take this pin out and just start. I would push. This is something I always forget to do. You're going to push all your pins in after you cut your thread to the size you want to start sewing with. Push all your pins down, because they will be in your way if you don't. And they hold really well. Even though it's a small head on these pins, I have not had any problems with them popping off. I've been doing Tenerife lace for quite a while now, and this is the method that I use. So now you've got your little strands, and my first stitch would be under this central spoke here. So I would take this thread and sew it right through that spoke. So I'm not going to show the pattern sewing right now, but this thread here is going to stay anchored the entire time. So when you get ready to take your pattern off, all you do is take your pin lifter and pull the pins out and unanchor that thread, and then you can just pull the whole thing off of the loom, and it's really nice. So try out that graph paper online, and you'll find that it gives you a lot of options to make whatever size pattern you want with however many size spokes you want.